Maybe you're like me and you've been waiting for the Canadian border to open up after the stupid pandemic. Well, in 2023, it finally happened.
Yes!
And I knew exactly where I wanted to go.
Tuktoyuktuk. Welcome to 1 Mile More.
Tuktoyuktuk is a small village way at the top of Northwest Territories and set right on the edge of the Arctic Ocean. The only way to get there by land is on a 560-mile gravel road called the Dempster Highway, and it's only just been finished by making it all the way to Tuk in 2017. Now the bike I'm going to use for the trip is this 2016 Kawasaki Versys 650 that I picked up for $2,500. And while it may look okay now, when I got it, it was looking pretty rough. In fact, I almost didn't buy it. So the guy I bought the bike from told me that the guy he had bought it from apparently had one humdinger of a girlfriend. And I suppose he apparently wasn't the best boyfriend, because, so the story goes, she attacked this poor bike with a claw hammer. And as I removed the bandages, the evidence of that violent night was revealed. And it appeared the poor thing had been thrown to the ground a few times, as well as not having the best of maintenance. And so I began doing what I could to mend its wounds and replacing the parts that were just too far gone. I was able to piece some of it together by using panel bond and aluminum on the backside and body filler on the front. It appeared the previous owner had used JB Weld to repair some of the smaller brakes, and it seemed to be holding up. So it was coming together, but it was far from perfect. However, I was planning on doing a vinyl wrap on the bike and hoping it would cover up a lot of the flaws. The wrap successfully covered up quite a bit, but being the first one I'd ever done, it had plenty of flaws of its own. But as long as you didn't look too close, it was good enough. Oh yes. With the finish now good enough for who it's for, it was time to start on the function. I added a mount for the GPS, which I also like to wire up to a toggle switch so it's not always shutting off with the ignition. On long trips it can become really tiresome not having enough wind protection, so I installed this medium-height V-Stream windshield. The next comfort modification was with the seat, where I replaced the stock cover and foam with a kit from Seat Concepts. As for luggage, I have to admit I made things a little more difficult than they needed to be. I started off with the rack system for Givi hard panniers. A little while later, and before buying the panniers themselves, I realized I wanted bags that were a little softer. I eventually went with semi-rigid luggage from SW Motech, which to me seemed like the best of both worlds between hard and soft luggage. This of course meant I needed to adapt completely different luggage systems together. Surprisingly, the bottom two mounts lined up perfectly. However, the top two required some fabrication. In the end, I was pleasantly surprised at how well the two systems worked with each other. I really wanted to keep the bike as light as possible and realized there was really no need for these big heavy grab handles. Tell you what, there's some weight there.
175. 7.2 pounds.
Of course, now with those handles missing, I'm without a significant mounting point for the luggage system. So I fabricated up some mounts that bolted to the frame where the handles once were. For my top luggage, I really only need a small bracket to support the small amount of lightweight luggage that I keep there. This was just enough to stay away from a bulky rack or even a massive top case, which I feel puts a lot of weight in a very bad location. I also added a skid plate by SW Motech and exhaust by Delkevic. However, I apparently barely filmed it.
All right, Versys owners, this is the Delkevic 14-inch oval stainless. I gotta say, it is gorgeous. So this is a Versys original exhaust, and that shows 12.8 pounds. For what it's worth.
The Delkevic exhaust wouldn't even register on the scale. However, the website says that it weighs 4.2 pounds, which makes it 8.6 pounds lighter. So I'm going to remove these turn signals. They actually work just fine, and I don't even think they look bad, but they do stick out quite a ways and are vulnerable in a tip over. And I'm afraid that not only would it break the turn signal, but it could break out the plastic as well, because it is only mounted in the plastic panel here. Fortunately, I do have these frame sliders. I thought about going with the crash bars that most people use, but I just kind of wanted to keep with more of a clean look and also keep the weight as light as possible. I picked up these universal LED lights, and they have double back tape on the one side, and you see they're flexible. And my thought was I would put them on the hand guards like so. As far as being vulnerable, I figure in a tip over, the ground would be at an angle about like this, unless it starts going upside down. So they should be relatively safe from damage, because the highest point would be right here. And so I would just drill a hole through the handguard and run the wires down to the original turn signal wiring. Now, I was actually hoping the LED lights would be a little bit brighter, but I think they'll be just fine. Now, this next bit of weight reduction is probably where I'm going to lose both people still watching. It involves removing the passenger peg mounts on both sides, and they're welded to the frame. As you can see, I've already got the peg itself removed, since I've had a passenger all of, I think, 5 times in the last 20 years. So if you're weird like me, having all of this unnecessary clutter and weight, it just feels wrong. And in the rare occasion that I actually get a girlfriend, I think I can figure out how to make it so I'll bolt it back on.
Well, here we go. I'm turning back now. You know what? It's surprisingly not that heavy. So here's that modified nut. So I'm gonna try to just tap it in. Just tap it in. Just give it a little tappy. Tap, tap, taparoo. Well, there we go. That wasn't so bad. Call me crazy, but that'll probably make me smile every time I look at it.
Well, now that my weight-saving mods are all welded up, it's actually time to put weight back on. You see, the longest stretch between gas stations on the way to Tuktoyuktuk is around 250 miles, and the range of the Versys is right around 250 miles. So it looks like I'm going to have to carry some gas with me. And lucky for me, I've got these 2 MSR gas cans with Touratech mount that I chose not to sell with my last bike. And I thought I could maybe mount them right down here. I even taped them in place and tipped the bike over to see if they would hit if I were to tip over. But that's with a level floor of a garage, and I thought any irregularity and it could puncture these, leaking out gas along with any sparks, probably not a good idea. Now it is up higher and toward the end of the bike, but I also noticed I've got a perfect spot right in this area that is protected basically on all sides. The bottle fits really nice right in there. And with the handles missing up here, there's even more space to get to them. For the eagle-eye viewers, you might notice, ha-ha, already got one done. So I set out making a couple more mounts out of this 1-inch square tubing. And since I already had the other side done, I could knock this side out without making any mistakes.
Oh, you're an idiot. Yep, I did it backwards. What a dork. So now we've got our old friend, the transfer punch. Now we have some neat and tidy extra gas cans tucked away safely. Oh yes, that might be fun to use. So the powder coating on these racks, as you can see, has some texture to it. I replicated it over here. You can see the little line right there where the paint's a little bit different. So this is how it turns out. And how I did that was with this textured paint. And I couldn't find it in a nice satin black, so I just went with whatever had the texture, and then I will top it off with this semi-gloss black. All right, we have the pannier racks all painted, and for the record, the semi-gloss black was too glossy and the flat black was too flat. And so for the final coat, I used this low gloss engine enamel. It dries a lot faster. To compare, this area is powder coat with the paint on top of it. So there's the similarity. Different, but better than completely smooth. There we go. But before we bolt these on, we need to address the holes in the side of the plastics. So I think I've struck a balance between way too long and time consuming and complete crap. So we've got great big holes with odd shapes. That one doesn't have too many angles going on, but this has got a few. I'm gonna use thin aluminum to make the patch, but we need a template. And in order to create one, we're gonna cover this up with tape.
Now, I have a tendency of going into way too much detail with things like this, so how about we speed it up and I'll just gloss through it.
Well, here we go. I just removed the tape. These things are, see, there's some give there. It's not perfect. I don't know if this is gonna hold up in the long run, but the rear ones are much more stable. And it's nice that with the Versys, there's so many different layers of bodywork. You've got this panel on top of this panel on top of this panel. And so having a few different layers back here doesn't stand out to me anyway as being really weird looking.
With the tail section buttoned up, I wanted to put the finishing touches on the frame where I had made my modifications.
So I've got the portions of the frame where I removed the passenger pegs. In primer, I went with just some simple self-etching primer. And then I thought about just painting the areas black and calling it good enough, but I really want this to look nice, like it maybe came from the factory like this. So I searched for Kawasaki touch-up paint, and I found this Touch-Up Direct. And this is metallic matte carbon gray. Well, the frame's looking pretty good now, I think. I'm really glad I went with that color matched paint. Almost looks factory.
One of the challenges with this ride to Tuktoyuktuk is what tires to use. So the trip should be at least 10,000 miles, so the tires would have to last that long. And then I've heard the Dempster Highway can be really nasty if it's wet. So for the back tire, it was pretty easy. I could just use this Motoz Tractionator GPS. From what I've heard, it should easily handle the miles and should be aggressive enough, should be perfect. However, they don't make that model of tire in this size for the 17-inch wheel on my Versys 650. Now this Shinko 705 has been working well for light off-road work, but I have a feeling that if the Dempster is muddy and greasy, they probably wouldn't be aggressive enough. So the thought was to change them out with a more aggressive tire. So I picked up this Continental TKC80. I think that'll be perfect at that point. However, if I were to put it on now, I think it'd probably be spent by the time I get to the Dempster, since it's a quite soft rubber compound. So the thought was run 705 till I get to the Dempster and then change out to this TKC80. But how do I get it up there? Do I ship it up there? I'm not even sure where I'd ship it to. And plus it's probably not real cheap. And then there's a fear of, for some reason, it's not there when I get there. Well, maybe I should just carry it with me. Now, I don't like the idea of a lot of extra weight and hassle of carrying it with, but I think I might have a plan for how to do it. Now, my first thought was to set the tire up here and put my luggage on top of it. But then it's just kind of squishing the tire, and to keep it from digging into my back, it'd have to be way out here in no man's land, and it just seems like a huge hassle to have to deal with it every time I load and unload the bike. Then I thought, well, what if I put the tire on the back of the bike like so? Then some of the weight would be down low instead of all of it up high. You'd still be able to see my license plate and turn signals, taillight. So I set about building 4 brackets that the tire could hang on and strap onto. So I've got my brackets all prepped for primer and paint, and I realized they serve another purpose. Wind chimes. Okay, actually that's really annoying.
we go. We've got the tire mounts all painted, mounted up there. Sits on there somewhat centered. Seems like it's a little right. I can still take the luggage off with the tire in place. There we go. I got to thinking this tire is on the back of the bike and will probably just get loaded with road debris, and especially if I ride in the rain. When it comes time to put the tire on, I don't want to have to clean all that garbage out. So it occurred to me that what if I were to shrink wrap it somehow? So I did a little search on Amazon, and lo and behold, they have this black shrink wrap. So we'll try putting that on the tire. For strapping down the tire, I thought about using like ratchet strap, I don't know, tying it off, and then I thought, you know, what about Velcro strap? And so I found this on Amazon. It's just a roll of Velcro material. So I just cut off a strip, tied it off right here, the extra Velcroed on top of itself, so it's Velcroed and tied. So you can see that's just tied on right there. Come around like so. Now at this point, the back would be against it. You do have to make a little twist here so that it'll Velcro onto itself. With this much area being Velcroed, it's really quite strong. It's not the craziest heavy material, but I'm not strapping a lot of weight onto there. Hopefully it won't like deteriorate.
So with the strap in 4 spots here on the 4 mounts, this thing seems really solid. I think this should hold just fine. Now, I'm not typically one to add fender. However, from previous experience, I really wanted to save from the unnecessary buildup on my fancy exhaust as well as the whole front of the engine. I was now nearing the end of my prepping of the bike for the trip and decided to gear it up for a little better fuel economy by going from a 15-tooth to a 16-tooth front sprocket, as well as doing some other maintenance.
Click.
I am such a dork.
And if you'd like to see the rest of the struggles I had on this trip, well, unfortunately I just had my jacket stolen off of my bike,
then I would suggest subscribing and hitting that notification bell so you know as soon as I post the next video. Also, feel free to leave a comment, and if you could give me a thumbs up, I'd sure appreciate it. Until next time, thanks for watching.